Imagine sitting in a courtroom, about to lose everything, when suddenly a phone call changes the entire course of your life. But here's the twist. It's not from a lawyer, a judge, or even a friend. It's from the White House. What would you do if you were in her shoes? The courtroom was tense, the air thick with judgment before the trial even began. She walked in, head held high, but the moment she took her seat, all eyes turned to her, not with curiosity, but with disdain. A police officer, his badge gleaming under the harsh lights, approached her. His voice was cold, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Mom, you need to leave. Now." Her crime? Existing. Being black in a space where she wasn't welcome. The officer didn't ask questions. He didn't care about her rights or why she was there. His job, as he saw it, was to remove her, to keep the room orderly. But orderly for whom? For the white faces staring at her like she didn't belong? For the system that had already decided she was guilty before she even spoke? She refused to move. "I have every right to be here," she said, her voice steady but her heart racing. The officer's hand tightened on her arm, his grip firm, his intentions clear. He wasn't asking anymore. He was forcing. The room watched in silence, some with pity, others with satisfaction. It was a scene that had played out too many times before, power crushing the powerless, hate disguised as duty. But this time, something was different. Her lawyer, a man who had seen this injustice too many times, stepped forward. "You touch her again, and he'll make sure this entire courtroom knows what you're really doing," he said, his voice low but fierce. The officer hesitated, but the damage was already done. The message was clear. She wasn't welcome here. Why? Why did it always come to this? Why did her skin color make her a target in a place that was supposed to be fair? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you fight, or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The officer's hand was still on her arm, his grip unrelenting, as if he could erase her presence through sheer force. Her lawyer, though, wasn't backing down. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly. "You're making a mistake," he said to the officer, his voice sharp. "And you're going to regret it." The officer sneered, clearly unimpressed. "Call whoever you want. It won't change a thing." But the lawyer wasn't calling just anyone. He was calling someone who could turn the entire room upside down. The seconds felt like hours as he spoke in hushed tones, his words urgent, his tone demanding action. Then it happened. The courtroom phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound that cut through the silence like a scream. Everyone froze. The judge, who had been watching the scene unfold with a detached indifference, slowly reached for the receiver. His expression shifted as he listened, his face going pale. The room held its breath. "Yes, sir," the judge said finally, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. He hung up the phone and looked at the officer. "Let her go. Now." The officer hesitated, his grip loosening but not releasing. "But now," the judge barked, his voice echoing through the room. The officer stepped back, his face a mix of confusion and anger. The woman stood tall, her eyes locked on the judge, waiting for an explanation. But none came. The judge simply nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted, something big. The lawyer leaned in and whispered, "That was the White House. They're watching this." The room erupted in murmurs. The White House? Why would they care about this case? About her? The answers didn't come, but the implications were clear. Someone powerful was paying attention, and that changed everything. But here's the question. Why did it take a call from the highest office in the land to make them see her as human? Why did her life only matter when someone with power said it did? What does that say about the system we live in? What would you have done if you were in that courtroom? Would you have spoken up, or would you have stayed silent? Let me know in the comments. The courtroom was a powder keg, and the phone call from the White House was the spark that lit the fuse. The judge's face was unreadable, but his hands trembled as he set the receiver down. The officer, still standing too close to her, looked like he'd been slapped. His authority, his power, it all crumbled in an instant. But the hate in his eyes? That didn't go away. If anything, it burned brighter. "You think this changes anything?" he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. His voice was venom, dripping with disdain. "You're still nothing." But she wasn't nothing. Not anymore. The room buzzed with whispers, everyone trying to piece together what had just happened. The White House? Here? For her? It didn't make sense, and that's what scared them. The system they thought they controlled had just been flipped on its head. Her lawyer stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss all charges. This case is a farce, and we all know it." The judge hesitated, his eyes darting to the phone, then back to the lawyer. He knew he had no choice. The call had made that clear. "Charges dismissed," the judge said, his voice hollow. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. But the victory felt hollow too. Why did it take a call from the most powerful office in the world to get justice? Why couldn't the system work for her without someone pulling strings from the top? The officer stormed out, his boots echoing like gunshots. The woman stood there, surrounded by people who had watched her suffer in silence. They avoided her eyes now, ashamed or afraid, she couldn't tell which. But she didn't care. She had won, not because of them, but in spite of them. As she walked out of the courtroom, the weight of what had just happened settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been pushed down, silenced, or erased. The system had failed her, just like it had failed so many others. But for once, it hadn't gotten away with it. The question is, why does it take something this extreme to make people see the truth? Why does justice only come when it's forced? Let me know what you think in the comments. If this story made you think, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Please note this story is a work of fiction only for education and entertainment purposes.